I gave my son a villa as a wedding gift, hoping his marriage would mark the beginning of a joyful new chapter. But instead of peace, chaos moved in. His wife's entire family, parents, siblings, even distant cousins, descended like vultures, claiming rooms and making demands as if they owned the place. What happened next shocked even our lawyer. But it wasn't the police or the courts that came to our rescue. No, it was something far more unexpected. It turned into a game of nerves, a high-stakes emotional roller coaster. Then my son said one simple phrase, just a few carefully chosen words. And that was all it took. By morning, they were gone. My son Anthony had always been the thoughtful one. While his friends chased careers in bustling cities, he chose to become a marine biologist, dedicating his life to ocean conservation. His passion for protecting fragile ecosystems matched his gentle demeanor, always putting others before himself, sometimes to a fault. When he met Vanessa during a coastal cleanup event in San Diego, their connection seemed genuine. She volunteered regularly, spoke passionately about environmental issues, and appeared to share Anthony's values. Within a year, they were engaged, and my husband Robert and I were cautiously optimistic. "She seems different," Robert said one evening as we discussed their engagement, "more grounded than the others." I nodded in agreement, though something in my gut whispered caution. Vanessa's family had attended a few holiday gatherings. Her parents, James and Diane Fletcher, seemingly pleasant but reserved. They owned a small gift shop in a tourist town, struggling to stay afloat amid rising costs. When they mentioned their lease was ending, I felt a pang of sympathy but thought nothing more of it. The wedding was set for June at our family vineyard in Sonoma. As a wedding gift, Robert and I decided to give Anthony and Vanessa our second home, a Mediterranean-style villa overlooking the Pacific that we'd purchased as an investment years ago. It needed updating, but the location was breathtaking. Private beach access, panoramic ocean views, and enough space for a growing family. "This is too generous," Anthony said, eyes glistening when we handed him the keys. "We can't accept this." "Nonsense," Robert replied. "Consider it an investment in your future together." Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs sooner. The day after we announced the villa gift, Vanessa's attitude shifted subtly. Her questions became more pointed, less about their future together and more about property details, square footage, renovation allowances, whether the title would be in both their names. "Just being practical," she explained when Anthony looked surprised at her sudden interest in legal matters. "My father always says you need to understand what you own." Then came the hints that snowballed into red flags. During a dinner at our home, Diane casually mentioned their lease situation again. "Such terrible timing, with the wedding and all. We might need to put our things in storage." James added, "If only we could find somewhere temporary while we look for a new shop location with living quarters." Their eyes darted toward Anthony, who immediately offered help without consulting Vanessa. "The villa has that separate guest cottage," he suggested. "Maybe you could use it until you find something permanent?" I caught Robert's concerned glance across the table. We'd renovated that cottage specifically as a potential home office for Anthony's research work. The most telling moment came during a walkthrough of the property. While Anthony excitedly discussed converting one room into a nursery someday, Vanessa's brother Derek measured walls and took photos of every room. When I asked what he was doing, he replied, "Just getting ideas for furniture placement." Vanessa mentioned I might crash here sometimes when I'm between gigs. Between gigs? Derek was 34 and had never held a job longer than 3 months. His career as a musician meant occasional weekend performances at local bars, hardly the schedule requiring a crash pad in a $1 million oceanfront villa. When I mentioned my concerns to Anthony, he brushed them aside. "They're just excited for us, Mom. They've never had much. It's natural they'd be impressed by the place." But I'd seen the calculating look in Diane's eyes when she surveyed the property. This wasn't admiration, it was assessment. The wedding was still 2 weeks away when Robert and I decided to surprise Anthony and Vanessa with a housewarming gift. Custom-made curtains for the master bedroom, crafted from sustainable fabrics we knew Anthony would appreciate. We drove to the villa on a bright Saturday morning, expecting to find the couple settling in, perhaps planning their honeymoon. Instead, we found chaos. 3 unfamiliar cars crowded the driveway. The front door stood wide open, and the sounds of multiple voices echoed from inside. As we stepped into the entryway, a teenage boy I'd never seen before brushed past us carrying a gaming console toward the media room. "Excuse me," I called after him. "Who are you?" "Vanessa's cousin Tyler," he replied without looking back. "I live here now." Before I could process this, Diane appeared in the hallway directing 2 men carrying a massive antique armoire. "No, not there. That goes in our suite, the master bedroom at the end of the hall." "Your suite?" Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. Diane turned, registering our presence with barely concealed annoyance. "Oh, we didn't expect you today." Her tone suggested we were the intruders. James emerged from the kitchen, beer in hand. "Marion, Robert, come see how we've rearranged things. Much more practical now." In stunned silence, we followed him through Anthony's transformed villa. The elegant minimalist furniture we'd selected was pushed against walls to make room for worn, oversized pieces, clearly from the Fletcher's home. The peaceful yoga space overlooking the ocean now housed Derek's drum set and amplifiers. The guest room had been converted into what James proudly called the family TV lounge. "Where's Anthony?" I finally managed to ask. "Market run," James waved dismissively. "Vanessa needed supplies for tonight's housewarming. We invited the extended family, about 30 people." Robert's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "And the master bedroom?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Well," Diane smiled condescendingly, "it makes the most sense for us to take it. We need the space and attached bathroom at our age. Anthony and Vanessa are young. They can manage with the smaller room down the hall." I stood frozen, my hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. Robert placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, but I could feel him trembling with barely contained fury. "You've moved in?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "All of you? Without discussing this with us?" James chuckled, taking another swig of beer. "Well, it's Anthony's house now, isn't it? And he's fine with it. Family helps family. That's how we Fletchers operate." Another woman emerged from the kitchen, Vanessa's sister Melissa, I recalled, carrying a toddler on her hip. "We've got the blue room set up for us," she announced, not bothering with a greeting. "Though it's a bit small for 2 adults and a child. Maybe we should switch with Derek? He doesn't need that much space." I looked around at these strangers rearranging the home we'd lovingly gifted our son. Where will Anthony work? His research requires space, privacy. "Oh, that marine nonsense," Diane waved dismissively. "Vanessa's helping him see that's not a practical career for a family man. James has connections at the resort development company. Much better prospects." The front door opened and Anthony appeared carrying grocery bags. His eyes widened, seeing us there. "Mom, Dad, I was gonna call you." His voice trailed off at the expression on our faces. Vanessa entered behind him, her demeanor instantly shifting when she saw us. "Anthony, take those to the kitchen. I need to speak with my future in-laws." Her tone was saccharine, but her eyes were cold. Once Anthony was out of earshot, she crossed her arms. "I know this seems sudden, but my family needed help. Would you rather they ended up homeless? What kind of people would that make us?" "This was meant to be your marital home," Robert spoke carefully, "not a commune." "It's our home to use as we see fit," she countered. "Anthony understands family obligations. Perhaps you should too." Derek appeared, slinging an arm around his sister's shoulders. "Besides, we've already made changes. That ridiculous sustainable heating system? Gone. We installed normal AC, much more practical." My heart sank. Anthony had designed that system himself, spending months researching eco-friendly options that wouldn't harm the coastal environment he loved. "Did Anthony agree to that?" I asked quietly. Derek smirked. "He doesn't understand technical stuff like we do. We made executive decisions." Anthony emerged from the kitchen, his expression shifting as he caught the tail end of Derek's comment. He looked from his future brother-in-law to the newly installed air conditioning unit, then to the pile of dismantled equipment in the corner. His sustainable heating system, now nothing but scrap. "You removed it?" His voice was barely audible. "Without asking me?" "It wasn't efficient," James interjected, waving his beard dismissively. "Cost us a fortune in energy last week." "Cost you?" Robert echoed. "You've been here a week already?" A flush crept up Anthony's neck as he stared at the dismantled system. 6 months of research, custom designs, careful installation, all destroyed. He'd spoken about that system with such pride, explaining how it would minimize their environmental footprint while maintaining comfort. "Anthony," I said gently, "can we speak privately?" Before he could answer, Vanessa stepped between us. "Whatever you need to say can be said in front of all of us. We're family now." "Are we?" I asked, meeting her gaze directly. "Because family respects boundaries. Family asks before making major changes. Family doesn't take over someone's home and push them into the smallest bedroom." Anthony's head snapped up. "What?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Vanessa shot a warning look at her mother, who had the decency to appear slightly embarrassed. "It's just temporary," Vanessa said quickly, "until we figure out the best arrangement for everyone." "Everyone?" Anthony repeated, looking around at the strangers filling his home. "Vanessa, we agreed your parents could use the guest cottage temporarily. When did that turn into—" He gestured at the transformed space. "They needed help," she snapped. "What was I supposed to do? Let my family struggle while we live in luxury? Don't be selfish." Anthony flinched at the word selfish as if he'd been struck. For a moment, no one spoke. Then very quietly he asked, "Why did you remove my heating system without telling me?" "It was impractical," Derek shrugged. "Besides, we needed the funds." "Funds?" Anthony and I spoke simultaneously. Vanessa shot her brother a silencing glare, but the damage was done. "You sold the components?" Anthony's voice had changed, something hardening behind his eyes. "My custom-built specialized equipment?" The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Anthony's breathing had become audible, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he finally spoke, his voice was unnervingly steady. "You sold my equipment that cost nearly $30,000 to develop and install." His gaze moved from Derek to Vanessa. "And you knew about this?" Vanessa's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered. "Anthony, it was just sitting there unused. The money went toward the family's expenses. It benefited all of us." "All of us?" Anthony repeated. "I don't recall seeing any of that money." James stepped forward, chest puffed with unearned authority. "Now listen here, boy. Once you marry into this family, you need to understand how things work. Individual ownership is a selfish concept. Family resources are communal." Robert, who had been silently seething, finally erupted. "That's rich coming from people who've contributed exactly nothing," Diane gasped dramatically. "How dare you? We've brought our expertise, our guidance. Do you think Anthony could manage a property like this without us?" I watched my son's face as these words landed. Something was changing in his expression, the realization dawning that the woman he loved viewed him as incapable, someone to be managed rather than respected. "Actually," Anthony said, his voice gaining strength, "I designed this heating system. I maintained this property. I earned the respect of my colleagues through my own work." He turned to Vanessa. "Did you tell them I'm being considered for the research grant? The one that would fund my own conservation lab?" Vanessa's expression flickered with something like panic. That marine biology nonsense? Anthony, we've discussed this. It's an unstable career path. My father's contact at the resort would have me destroying the very ecosystems I've dedicated my life to protecting, Anthony finished. Is that what you want for me? To abandon everything I care about? What I want, Vanessa snapped, patience finally breaking, is a husband who can provide security, not someone playing with fish while my family struggles. The words hung in the air like poison. Anthony stared at her, the woman he thought he knew, truly seeing her for the first time. So that's what this was about. The house, my family's resources. Vanessa flinched, quickly recovering with a practiced smile. You're being dramatic, Anthony. Of course I love you. The house is just a nice bonus for us, for our future. Our future? Anthony's voice had taken on an edge I'd never heard before. Or your family's future, Derek snorted. Come on, man. You've got all this space. Did you really think you two needed it all to yourselves? That's the problem with you rich people. So selfish with your resources. Rich people? I interjected. My husband and I worked for 30 years to build what we have. Anthony has earned every opportunity through his own merit and hard work. James waved his hand dismissively. Hard work doesn't buy oceanfront property. Let's not pretend this is anything but privilege. Anthony's face darkened. The privilege was mine to share, but you didn't wait to be invited. You took, you claimed, you destroyed. He turned to Vanessa, and you let them. Vanessa's facade finally cracked. What was I supposed to do? They're my family. They needed somewhere to go when they lost the lease. Derek was living in his car. Melissa's husband left her with nothing. Was I supposed to let them suffer while we lived in luxury? You could have asked me, Anthony replied, his voice quieter now. We could have figured something out together. Instead, you moved them in behind my back. You let them take over. You let them sell my equipment. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Anthony's words hung in the air. Then Robert cleared his throat. I think we all need some time to process this situation. He looked directly at James. I suggest your family find alternative accommodations immediately. James laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the room. Alternative accommodations? This coming from the man who gave away $1 million property? I don't think you understand how this works now. Once this wedding happens, this house becomes family property. Vanessa's family property. The wedding, Anthony repeated, as if just remembering. He looked at Vanessa, then at her assembled family members. Something shifted in his expression, resolve replacing confusion. There won't be a wedding. The room erupted in protests. Vanessa grabbed Anthony's arm, her nails digging into his skin. You don't mean that. You're just upset. We can work this out. Anthony's declaration should have ended matters, but the Fletchers weren't ready to abandon their claim to the villa so easily. When Anthony asked them to leave, James planted himself firmly on the sofa. We've already moved our things in, he declared smugly. Established residency, as they say. You want us out? You'll need formal eviction proceedings. Diane nodded firmly. 30 days notice, minimum. That's the law. Anthony looked stunned. You're not tenants. You're guests who've overstepped. Prove it, Derek challenged, arms crossed. We've been receiving mail here for weeks. Vanessa invited us. We have keys. Robert pulled me aside, whispering, they've planned this. The mail, the keys, they're trying to establish tenant rights. I felt sick. These people had orchestrated a takeover of my son's home and future, calculating each move. We'll stay at a hotel tonight, Anthony announced suddenly. I need to clear my head. As we headed toward the door, Melissa called out, Don't bother coming back without an eviction notice. The family laughed as if this was all a grand joke. The next morning, Anthony's phone buzzed constantly with messages from Vanessa, alternating between apologies, accusations, and pleas to reconsider. He silenced it, face grim as we met with our family attorney. They're exploiting a loophole, our lawyer explained. If they can prove established residency, even without a formal lease, the eviction process could take months. Months? Anthony looked devastated. They'll destroy everything. His fears weren't unfounded. That afternoon, we drove past the villa to find Derek and several friends unloading music equipment onto the lawn. A makeshift stage was being constructed on the oceanfront terrace. "What are they doing?" Anthony asked, horrified. The Ocean Villa Music Festival proved to be the Fletchers' undoing. By Friday afternoon, their promotional posts had reached the local coastal preservation community, the very people who respected Anthony's conservation work. Outraged by the unauthorized commercial event in an environmentally sensitive area, activists began calling the Coastal Commission and local officials. Meanwhile, Robert called in a favor with Judge Harrison, an old friend who expedited our case review. Upon seeing the social media posts advertising paid entry to a property they didn't own, the judge immediately recognized this wasn't a standard tenancy dispute. "This is commercial exploitation of private property," he declared, signing an emergency order that allowed law enforcement to intervene. Saturday morning, as the Fletchers were setting up speakers dangerously close to protected dune areas, 3 police cruisers and a Coastal Commission enforcement vehicle pulled up to the villa. A small crowd of neighbors and environmental activists had gathered across the street, many holding signs supporting Anthony. "Respect our coastline," read one. "Fletcher family fraud," declared another. Officer Reynolds approached James, who was collecting cash from early arrivals. "Sir, I have an emergency court order prohibiting this event and authorizing removal of all non-residents." James blustered, waving his hands. "This is our home. We have tenant rights." The officer remained unmoved. "Tenants don't charge admission to other people's property, sir. This is commercial activity without permits on a residential property in a protected coastal zone." Diane rushed forward. "We're just having a family gathering. These are all cousins." A Coastal Commission officer stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Would you like to explain the ticket sales process through your personal Venmo account? Or these?" He displayed their social media advertisements, "or why you're placing amplification equipment in protected dune habitat." Neighbors began recording with their phones as James and Derek argued with officials. When Melissa dramatically claimed they were being persecuted, someone in the crowd called out, "They sold his custom eco-heating system for parts. Anthony Grayson designed that system to protect the marine environment." Another voice added, "They took over his home while he was at work. The Graysons are good people who support this community." The public support was overwhelming. Anthony, who had always kept a low profile despite his environmental work, stood speechless as community members defended his character and contributions. With police supervision, the Fletchers were given 2 hours to collect essential personal belongings before vacating the premises. The atmosphere inside the villa was tense as they stuffed clothes and valuables into suitcases, shooting venomous glares at Anthony and us. "You've ruined everything," Vanessa hissed, shoving past Anthony. "We could have been happy if you weren't so selfish." I watched my son absorb this final blow, his face a mask of composure that couldn't quite hide his pain. He had loved this woman, or at least the person he thought she was. As the Fletchers prepared to leave, James suddenly clutched his chest, staggering dramatically against the wall. "My heart," he gasped, sliding to the floor. "I think I'm having an attack," Diane screamed, rushing to his side. "Call an ambulance! He has a condition!" The police exchanged skeptical glances, but Anthony, ever compassionate, immediately called 911. While waiting for paramedics, Diane tearfully explained that the stress of being thrown out on the street had triggered James's serious heart condition. The paramedics arrived quickly, performing a thorough examination. After several minutes, the lead EMT straightened up. "Sir, your vitals are completely normal. There's no indication of cardiac distress." "That's impossible," James protested weakly. "I can feel it. The pain, the pressure." The EMT's expression remained professional but firmly skeptical. "We can transport you to the hospital for further evaluation. But I should inform you that falsifying a medical emergency to delay legal proceedings can result in charges." James miraculously recovered, declining transport. As this charade played out, Derek and Melissa had been suspiciously absent. Officer Reynolds found them in the master bedroom, attempting to remove artwork from the walls. "Put that back immediately," he ordered, hand moving to his radio. "It was a gift," Melissa claimed, clutching a valuable painting to her chest. "Vanessa gave it to me." "That's a limited edition conservation print," Anthony said quietly. "Signed by the artist who died last year. It's worth over $15,000. Reynolds took the artwork carefully. "Add attempted theft to the report," he told his partner. When confronted, Vanessa made her final desperate play, turning to Anthony with tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "It's yours. Are you really going to abandon your child?" The room fell silent at Vanessa's declaration. I watched Anthony closely, seeing a flash of shock cross his face before his expression settled into something more measured. He stepped closer to Vanessa, his voice low but firm. "If you're pregnant, I'll support the child in every way. But I'll require a paternity test, and any support will go directly to the child's needs through a court-approved arrangement." Vanessa's face crumpled. The calculated tears vanished, replaced by genuine frustration. "Fine," she spat. "I'm not pregnant, but you owe us for emotional damages. We'll sue you for everything you have." Robert stepped forward, his voice cold with finality. "Before you pursue that path, consider this. We have documented everything. Your family's unauthorized occupation, the sale of Anthony's property, the attempted commercial use of protected land, and now, a false medical emergency and attempted theft. Not to mention your own fraudulent pregnancy claim, witnessed by law enforcement." He nodded toward Officer Reynolds, who was indeed documenting the exchange. "You can leave quietly now," Robert continued, "or face multiple criminal and civil charges. Your choice." The weight of this reality visibly settled on the Fletchers. James suddenly recovered from his heart attack, muttered something to Diane, who nodded grimly. As they gathered their remaining belongings, Anthony approached me, speaking so only I could hear. "Mom, I need to say something to them before they go." I squeezed his arm, concerned. "Are you sure? You don't owe them anything." "I'm sure," he replied, his voice steady. When the Fletchers were assembled near the door, Anthony addressed them calmly. His words, the ones that would haunt them long after they left, came not as a shout or a threat, but as a simple, devastating truth. "You saw a house, possessions, money, things you could take, but you never saw me. I would have helped your family if you'd asked honestly. I would have shared what I had. Instead, you tried to take everything, and you've lost even the little you might have had." The weight of those words hung in the air. No protests, no comebacks followed. One by one, the Fletchers filed out, Vanessa last among them. At the threshold, she turned back, meeting Anthony's gaze one final time. For a brief moment, something like regret flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by a hardened mask as she walked out of his life forever. 6 months later, the villa had been transformed. Gone were the garish decorations and mismatched furniture the Fletchers had brought. In their place, Anthony had created a space that reflected his values and vision, sustainable, thoughtful, and harmonious with the coastal environment. The guest cottage now housed a small but state-of-the-art marine research lab, funded by the prestigious grant he'd been awarded. The main house had been partially converted into an educational center, where local schools brought students to learn about ocean conservation. I visited one afternoon to find a group of children gathered on the terrace, listening intently as Anthony explained the delicate ecosystem of tide pools, His face was animated, his hands gesturing enthusiastically as he pointed toward the shore. This was the son I knew, passionate, generous, and holy himself. When the students departed, we walked along the beach, Anthony pointing out recent improvements to the dune restoration project he'd initiated. "You know," I said carefully, "your father and I would understand if you wanted to sell this place. After everything that happened." Anthony shook his head, smiling. "The Fletchers tried to take this place because they saw it as a possession, something valuable to exploit, but they missed what makes it truly special." He gestured toward the horizon. "This connection to the ocean, the opportunity to protect something important, to share knowledge with others. That's the real value here." He paused, picking up a smooth stone from the sand. "Besides, something good actually came from that whole mess." "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow. "Remember Dr. Elena Morales from the Coastal Commission? The one who helped stop the Fletcher's music festival?" A slight flush colored his cheeks. "We've been seeing each other. Nothing serious yet, but she sees the world the way I do." I smiled, remembering the passionate, brilliant woman who had spoken so eloquently about protecting coastal habitats. She'd seen Anthony, really seen him, for who he was. Later that evening, as we shared dinner on the terrace, Anthony raised his glass. "To lessons learned," he said, "and to knowing your own worth." Robert squeezed my hand under the table, both of us feeling the same bittersweet pride. Our son had weathered a storm that might have broken someone else. Instead, he had emerged stronger, clearer about his purpose, and wiser about the people he allowed into his life. The villa, once nearly stolen from him, had become exactly what it was meant to be, not just a house, but a reflection of his truest self, a place where his gifts could flourish and be shared with others. In the months that followed, the story of the Fletcher family's attempted takeover spread throughout our coastal community. People were fascinated by the audacity of their scheme and moved by Anthony's resilience in the face of such betrayal. Many locals who had previously known my son only as the quiet marine biologist now greeted him with newfound respect. The legal consequences for the Fletchers were significant. The unauthorized commercial event on protected coastal property resulted in substantial fines from the Coastal Commission. The attempted theft and property damage led to criminal charges against Derek and Melissa. James and Diane avoided prosecution only by agreeing to a settlement that included making restitution for the sold heating system. As for Vanessa, she quickly moved on to another relationship, a wealthy developer 20 years her senior. But her family's reputation had been irreparably damaged.